friendly encounter with the master in the air, the unseen realm. And so we the later generations are always with Yahweh from now on. I'm gonna tell you about the anointed silence, not an act of kingdom defiance. The truth is plain as that day. One generation will seize the way away, come what may. Messiah came down to meet and greet. How different, how awesome, how sweet. Oh my, oh my, oh my. He did not lie. First came the sad total falling away. Then came that unseen snatching away. Once that day that took them all away. No more new records or documents were made. The sounds of silence reigned from 70 AD to 110 AD, proving that no one was left to proclaim, and that's not shady. I'm gonna tell you about the anointed silence, not an act of kingdom defiance. The truth is plain as that day. One generation will seize the way away, come what may. Messiah came down to meet and greet. How different, how awesome, how sweet. Oh my, oh my, oh my. He did not lie. Every book was penned before he came back in the first century. Then 40 years of silence weird for 40 years after he reappeared. Then 40 years of silence weird for 40 years after he reappeared. Why then the people's conscience not seared? Their response won a great fear. He returned when the remnant yearned for the parousia in the fellowship clouds. Now we know how to break that silent sound. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. The sound of silence broken by you and me. The silence for 40 years following 70 AD. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. Gives testimony and kingdom glee. For the master himself descended from the Shemam with a shout, with the voice of the chief heavenly Malak, and with the Shafar, and with the Tekiah Gedolah Yahweh. And the dead and Messiah rose first. After that, those that were living and remaining were seized together with them into the clouds, and had a friendly encounter with the master in the air, the unseen realm. And so we the later generations are always with Yahweh from now on. I'm gonna tell you about the anointed silence, not an act of kingdom defiance. The truth is plain as that day. One generation will seize the way away, come what may. Messiah came down to meet and greet. How different, how awesome, how sweet. Oh my, oh my, oh my. He did not lie. First came the sad total falling away. Then came that unseen snatching away. Once that day that took them all away. No more new records or documents were made. The sounds of silence reigned from 70 AD to 110 AD, proving that no one was left to proclaim, and that's not shady. I'm gonna tell you about the anointed silence, not an act of kingdom defiance. The truth is plain as that day. One generation will seize the way away, come what may. Messiah came down to meet and greet. How different, how awesome, how sweet. Oh my, oh my, oh my. He did not lie. Every book was penned before he came back in the first century. Then 40 years of silence weird for 40 years after he reappeared. Then 40 years of silence weird for 40 years after he reappeared. Why then the people's conscience not seared? Their response won a great fear. He returned when the remnant yearned for the parousia in the fellowship clouds. Now we know how to break that silent sound. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. The sound of silence broken by you and me. The silence for 40 years following 70 AD. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. Gives testimony and kingdom glee. For the master himself descended from the Shemam with a shout, with the voice of the chief heavenly Malak, and with the Shafar, and with the Tekiah Gedolah Yahweh. And the dead and Messiah rose first. After that, those that were living and remaining were seized together with them into the clouds, and had a friendly encounter with the master in the air, the unseen realm. And so we the later generations are always with Yahweh from now on. I'm gonna tell you about the anointed silence, not an act of kingdom defiance. The truth is plain as that day. One generation will seize the way away, come what may. Messiah came down to meet and greet. How different, how awesome, how sweet. Oh my, oh my, oh my. He did not not lie. First came the sad total falling away. Then came that unseen snatching away. Once that day that took them all away. No more new records or documents were made. The sounds of silence reigned from 70 AD to 110 AD, proving that no one was left to proclaim, and that's not shady. I'm gonna tell you about the anointed silence, not an act of kingdom defiance. The truth is plain as that day. One generation will seize the way. Oh wait, come what may. Messiah came down to meet and greet. How different, how awesome, how sweet. Oh my, oh my, oh my. He did not lie. Boy. Every book was penned before he came back in the first century. Then 40 years of silence wait for 40 years after he reappeared. Then 40 years of silence wait for 40 years after he reappeared. Why then the people's conscience not seared? Their response won a great fear. He returned when the remnant yearned for the parousia in the fellowship clouds. Now we know how to break that silent sound. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. The sound of silence broken by you and me. The silence for 40 years following 70 AD. Shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. Gives testimony and kingdom glee. For the master himself descended from the shaman with a shout.
Yeah,
The voice of the chief heavenly Malak and with a Shaphan and with
yeah,
the
that's
Takia
what I'm
Gadola
talking
Yahweh.
about.
And the dead and Messiah
First
rose first. After that,
Thessalonians
those that were
4.
living and remaining were seized
That's
together with them
right.
into the clouds and
15
had a
through
friendly
18. That's what I'm talking about. Shalom out there. I'm with everyone's favorite shlichim, yours truly, and Samuel Thompson, elder bishop and overseer of the entire Australian continent. How are you, my brother? We are now on episode, we are episode 16 of the Declaring the First Century Return of our Mashiach. Welcome, family. Welcome, welcome. So,
Shalom.
talk to me, Sam. Are you still sleeping or what?
No, I'm wide awake. Wide awake.
Shabbat shalom to you. It's Saturday there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom. I'm on my second cup of coffee, so
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
Well, one thing we know for sure is if you're on your second cup of coffee, you're not a Mormon.
Well, that's true. That's
You're
true.
not a Mormon believer, right?
No, I don't think I could. That's one of the reasons why well, probably the only reason I didn't become a Mormon.
Yeah. Because you'd have to give up coffee and you'd also have to accept the angel Bologna,
That's right.
right? And we definitely don't want to accept any of the teachings of the Angel Bologna.
No.
So I think we did a pretty good job in our last time together. I think we did a pretty good job with Daniel. We covered it pretty extensively, right?
Yeah.
And today, what I'd like to do, I got to tell you something. I got to confess something. Either this understanding of the return of Yahusha is a blessing, or it's a curse. Now I'm going to explain to you why I would make that kind of a statement. The blessing is obvious, right? It's blessed are your eyes for they see these things, right? And we accept the consummation and the marriage. We're married. We're not engaged. I mean, the blessings are obvious. But the problem with being a covenant eschatology advocate or a full covenant eschatology advocate is that from one week to another, I got to examine new stuff. As I'm studying this thing, I've got to not only entertain, new things that I never considered just a week before.
Mm-hmm.
There's been so much buried about the second coming of Yahusha, the parousia, the akronomai, that, to be honest, it makes the Dead Sea Scrolls findings look like a Sunday hymnal for children, because just from last Yom Shishi, Freitag, from last Freitag to today, I've had to look, study, meditate, re-examine. I can share stuff with you today, and I don't mean this personally, that you've never heard of, because I've never heard of it. Last Friday, I'd never heard of it, right?
Mm.
And much of our audience has never heard of it, and so I can't really do it today because A, I don't want to. B, I don't want to. C, I don't want to. D, I'm not prepared. E, I'm not prepared. And F, I want to save it for our biggest listening audience, which is usually Shabbat. We're on Shabbat, 1 p.m. Eastern time, just like Yahusha. Why do you keep Sabbath? Well, because Luke 4:16 says that Yahusha, as was his custom, kept the Shabbat. He certainly wasn't doing it to keep the Pharisees, to please the Pharisees. He was doing it to obey his Father. So it's better than playing religious roulette. Okay, that's one of those things that goes through the old heavens and the old earth and the new heavens and the new earth, and I firmly believe that. But I may share a couple of tidbits, but we really want to get into 1 Thessalonians 4 today. But kind of what I've been learning since last week goes right along with 1 Thessalonians 4. What if I told you, Sam, and you're not gonna know how to react. So I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just showing you what I mean by this is crazy. I mean, this doctrine doesn't end well. Audience relevancy, no, and like that's the end of the. No, this is some deep, buried truths, and I want to point out two things before, and then get your feedback before we go into 1 Thessalonians 4. What if I told you there are two great tribulations? How you like me now?
Well, look, nothing surprises me. I never reject anything. I never say, "Oh no, I can't accept that," or "I don't agree with that," until I am given once you give me the information, that's when I study it, dissect it, and then I'll have an argument with you privately, and then we'll discuss it. But I never, since about maybe 15 years ago, I started to make sure I question everything.
Yep.
So even if you bring something out, I'm more than willing to hear it.
Let me clarify. I don't mean two great tribulations in history. Two parts of the great tribulation. There was only one. Let me clarify that. In other words, there was only one great tribulation at the time of the Roman Jewish War, right? I'm not talking about another one at the end of the world or some nonsense like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that Matthew 24, Luke 21, Luke 17, Mark 13 is crystal clear. That, to give you an example, and we're going to get into 1 Thessalonians in a second. So you'll see that I'm not crazy. I just wanted to clarify that. We're not talking about another great tribulation because there's only one, right?
Right.
But there were two parts to it, because remember when Yahushua said, except those days be cut short, no flesh would survive? Well, we were not supposed to go through the wrath because he told us to flee, right?
Right.
So we're not appointed to wrath. 1 Thessalonians, we're not appointed to wrath, but to obtain deliverance. So we the elect, he says, except those days be shortened, no flesh would survive, right? But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Well, it can't just be the Roman Jewish War of the spring of 66 to 70, because that's the wrath of Yahuwah, and we were not called to go through the wrath. And those days didn't need to be cut short because we were already in hiding. The few remaining believers were already outside of Jerusalem. They had followed the master's instructions. There was another part of the thlipsis, the tribulation, where the wrath had not begun, you see, and that was the Neronic persecution. So just to give you an idea, the Neronic persecution was from 64 to 66.
Right.
And Yahuwah cut that persecution short with the coming of his wrath, which we call the Great Tribulation. And if not, none of the elect would survive. But for the elect's sake, he cut those days short. Not the days of the 42 months, but the days leading up to the Roman Jewish war. He cut those days short during the Neronic persecution to allow our forefathers to escape. So that's about as far as I'm willing to go today. And I know it's right because it's right out of Scripture. And Yahusha did not appoint us to wrath, and yet he cut the days of the tribulation short. Well, he didn't cut the days of the 3.5 years short because we were not in the 3.5 years. That was for Jerusalem and unbelieving Judah, right?
Right.
So it fits perfectly.
I can see it. I can see it. Like the fact that they were persecuted under Nero, and some of them died under Nero. So I can see that, without an argument.
No, yeah. And the amazing thing is, and I heard brother say this, Ed Stevens, who's an excellent scholar. Don's an excellent proclaimer. Don Preston regarding time, things like that. But regarding consummation, he has a lot of value. Ed has a lot of valuable things to share. And one of the things that he was sharing was that, check this out. See if this makes sense. I know it's going to make sense to you, but I'm talking to our listening family. So, and I hope this is one of your favorite podcasts, because by now, we're already in our 16th episode. And usually people are, they are behavioral addiction or regularity. And so I hope that we are part of your listening schedule on a regular basis, not only live, but on tape, even though it's not tape, but you know what I'm saying. So a futurist who believes that Messiah has not come back, they cannot point to history and say, well, not only Scripture says this, but history says this. You know why they can't point to history? Because they don't believe that the coming of Yahushua was in the past. We, on the other hand, can point to history, and we should. When we combine Josephus, Tacitus, Zippanus, I'm probably mispronouncing that wrong, we have 4 or 5 secular Greco-Roman and Jewish historians. And what I have found out is that Josephus tells you exactly when the resurrection was. Exactly. And the resurrection to be raised and to get married, to marry his bride. Well, guess what? Guess what Josephus says that happened? The angels, and let us remove hence and all the heavenly exit. Guess when that happened? It was Pentecost. It was Shavuot. And when we think of Shavuot, we think of what? We think of Israel marrying or engaging to Yahuwah. So it makes sense that the marriage supper of the Lamb, i.e. the resurrection that we're about to read in 1 Thessalonians, took place at Pentecost. And Josephus records it. My point is, history records the parousia. The futurists cannot rely on history because, as far as they're concerned, nothing happened except the fall of Jerusalem or partial fulfillment. So if history is on our side, and we understand that Josephus and Yisapon and Tacitus talk about voices coming out of Sheol and let us depart, angelic armies, chariots were heard in the sky on a nightly basis, right? Even a smiling face in the sky that was moving. So history is on our side. There is actually evidence of the result of the parousia. The futurist, he's not going to rely on history. And the point I'm making is, it's a shame that we who are fulfilled eschatology don't understand that history is on our side, that we can appeal to history.
Yes.
And we should.
I agree. And this is a majority of the futurists that I've come across, or others that have come across, they wouldn't even know if they know Josephus. Most of them don't, because they, I'm trying to use a nice word, but even if they did, they've never read any of his articles, never read any of his book. Simple as
Yep.
that.
And matter of fact, from what I remember, it's in chapter 6 of the Jewish Wars. You could look it up. Anybody can go online. I don't have it in front of me, but from what I recall, and you will see these events. And remember, Josephus was a priest, and
Right.
he had access to the other priests. So the people that were telling him these strange events started happening on Shavuot, Pentecost, in 66 AD, and continued through to 70 AD. Okay, you know where he was getting his information from? The temple priests. He was
Right.
because he was a warrior against Rome, and then he escaped into a cave, and they were hiding from the Romans. Everybody committed suicide rather than fall into the hands of the Romans, but Josephus decided not to do that and to surrender, and he became their slave. And he convinced them that he would betray the Jews, which he did. So they allowed him to return to Judea, and he had access to the priests and what they were hearing. They were disturbed because they were hearing these things. And so the Parousia is recorded. The shofar, the rustling, the people coming out of Hades, Revelation 20, verses 10 through 13. People were literally coming out of that, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Right.
So let's go to First Thessalonians 4. But what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm saying that a lot of this that I didn't even understand as of last week. I mean, as recently as last week, I did not understand this. And
Right.
so the problem with the second coming of Yahusha, it doesn't end as a factoid, right?
Hmm.
It's a constant amazement and unfolding of information that was previously withheld.
Well, I think we've just we haven't even got to the where we need to get to. We're just starting. I mean, if this is what it's like when we're just starting, imagine what the rest of the story is going to tell. It's just absolutely amazing, and I'm the same. Like every time I read something, I see, whether it be Don Preston, whether it be Monty Porter, whether it be Ed Stevens. I quite like Ed Stevens stuff. I've read a lot of his stuff, and I can absolutely agree 100%, no doubt about it. And this is the thing: we can agree with other preachers, other teachers, without agreeing. And what I mean by that is that we can agree with the articles that they write on the subject, but not dismiss them or write them off as heretics, like we get. And this is the thing: we are not about fame, popularity, or making money, because I don't have any money to worry about. We're here to simply restore truth, and I admonish and I encourage you all, and I'm thankful for Moshe doing the study and the research that he does, because saves me time, one, but it also helps me to put to connect the dots. It's just absolutely amazing. So, as I said, what we bring out, test it though. Don't just accept it, but test it and enjoy it, embrace it, and thank Yahuwah for the fact that you've got people like us that are willing to put it out there, are willing to be criticized, ostracized, and everything else.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking about testing it, in the Yahweh willing, in the upcoming Shabbats, I'm going to bring out a PowerPoint that was made, and you're going to see the sequential events of the Parousia. One thing to remember before we start on First Thessalonians 4 is there's a concept that we all have to get rid of, and this is a very important point, and that's why I'm bringing it up now. This is a very important point. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's us. I don't care if it's people in our listening audience. It doesn't matter. One thing we have to get rid of, even as full covenant eschatology believers, this idea that the parousia, or the second advent, is a single event in a single day in a 24-hour period. That's what most of
Right.
us think. Oh, he came back in 70 AD. And then we think of it subsequently we think of it, he came back on this day, a 24-hour day. He came back at a set point in time. But not only the linguistic concept, but the biblical concept of parousia is none of that. It is the presence of a king, long expected, and then a king who abides with his subjects. He stays with his subjects. He doesn't come in 24 hours and then at sunset he leaves. No,
Right.
it's an abiding presence. You see what I'm
Yes.
saying? And that's very important, because if that's true, and it is, so 70 AD is a lot bigger than 70 AD. What are all the events that led up to 70 AD? Now, this is some
Correct.
of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing. You may already know some of those things. But to get to 70 AD, there had to be check, 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 check. And then once he returned, then he abode with us until Jerusalem was destroyed and until the murderers were held accountable. But the murderers were not held accountable the second he returned. In other words, 70 AD is a lot bigger than 70 AD, is the easiest way that I can put it.
Well, that's right. And I mean, like, before you go on, like,
Yeah.
with I always say, I mean, people get, not suspicious, but they get aroused because we say AD 70, AD 70, and the reality is, you're right. This is not just one day in AD 70 that all this happened. We're talking about decades leading up. Obviously, the last 7 years of that, of the 60s into the 70s, was when it all was hot. But the point is that, people don't realize that many of the believers in Messiah were taken to Rome and they were fed to the dogs and the lions. And we can go on with all the stories that you don't hear about in the scriptures. But like I said, you're right. And I think that when we start to explain it to people, we need them to know that this is not just a one-day event, single event that happened in AD 70, and everything happened, the tribulation, Yahushua coming, the temple being built, everything happened in AD 70. No, the actual war itself, I think, was 3 years before Titus could take Jerusalem altogether. So it took them 3 years. What were they doing? Sitting around drinking coffee next to the campfire? No, they were fighting. People were dying. There were thousands, probably millions of people that were dying. And what Josephus records is only what he recorded. There's other probably millions that were slaughtered and killed, Romans and Jewish zealots and whoever else. It's amazing. So yeah, not just one day in 70 AD. 70 AD is the pivotal point where everything ended, if you want to call it that.
And what I have found out is that the Great Tribulation, the 3.5 years, is actually mercy to the believers. It cut short the days of the persecution. In other words, there was persecution, but for the elect's sake, those days were cut short, right? So the coming of Yahusha was to cut short those days for the elect,
Right.
that they may, the few, the remnant, the very few, that's another topic,
Right.
the very few may escape the onset of the Roman Jewish war. When I saw this, I mean, I about ordered a cheesecake.
Wow.
I just about ordered a cheesecake. So the actual Great Tribulation, the 3.5 years, the day of wrath, which was not meant for the believers, because First Thessalonians 5 says he is, and 3 here, he has not, I can get the exact verse, he has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain deliverance through our Messiah. Okay?
Yes.
And so it never occurred to me that what he cut short was they'll bring you into synagogues, they will scourge you, they will hate you for my name's sake. All that is the Nero persecution.
Yes.
And
yes.
those are the days, which is part of the tribulation or the preamble.
Right.
The preamble. Those are the days he cut short. He didn't cut short the 3.5 years for the Jews. The 3.5 years were to destroy Jewry and Romanism.
Yes.
I mean, when I saw this, like I said, I just about ordered cheesecake. I couldn't believe I mean, it's amazing stuff, and it's been there in the history books, and that's the point. The futurists cannot point back to the Nero persecution or to the Roman Jewish War, which together is the time of thlipsis, and one is shortened, and then the other commences. But the parousia involved both parts of the tribulation. So I didn't say two tribulations. I said one tribulation. Part one was persecution. Those days were cut short, and then the wrath of Yahuwah upon the unrighteous. So
Right.
we'll talk more about that hopefully in coming weeks. But it's just fascinating. I don't care
Yes.
if it's 9 at night. I don't care if it's 4. That's fascinating. I mean, I just the beauty to behold those things, and that's the advantage we have as full covenant preterists. We can look back and say, you cannot match this. So instead of looking back at the historical evidence, Josephus, Ziphinus, Tacitus, Cassius Dio, the futurist has guesswork and date setting. Okay, so you're going to have to choose people who are in the middle, people who don't know what to believe, which I'm assuming is a good portion of the body of Yahusha. You're going to have to choose between scripture plus validated historical evidence, or scripture the way you perceive it with no historical evidence. So we have a big advantage on the futurists. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
They don't have that advantage. They have nothing to look back on. Okay, Sam, so you want to start us in 15?
15. For this we say to you by the word of Yahuwah, that we who are alive and remaining until the coming presence of the Master shall not be resurrected before those who are already dead in the Amunah.
Okay, go ahead and share your understanding.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's pretty clear cut that those alive and remaining, firstly, Paul is addressing them and the fact that there are going to be some that aren't going to remain at that time. I mean, he himself probably knew that he was going to be cut off or killed before that day. Those that die, whether through physical age or whether through being martyred, etc., it wasn't going to prevent anything from happening. Those that were alive weren't going to prevent those that had died in the Master from basically getting up before them. Nothing's going to stop Yahuwah's order. Nothing's going to stop Yahuwah's plan. Whether you're dead or whether you're alive, it still continues.
Yep. So it says here, right, that those who will rise first are the dead in the Amunah, correct?
Right.
But I want to, and your thoughts. Look at verse 15. So the word of Yahuwah is saying, it's not Paul. It's a thus says Yahuwah.
Yes, correct.
Those who are alive and remain. Now that word remain should be interesting and it should be noted. The reason is because I think I alluded to this last week, but I'm going to allude to it again. Let's assume there were 1 million believers in Yahusha in 30 AD at the time of his resurrection, right? Let's assume there was 1 million believers. Now we fast forward 40 years. For 40 years, there was persecution, there was thlipsis, tribulation against the believers. Then we come to the time of great apostasy, where Yahusha said in Luke 18:8, when the Son of Man returns, will he find any true believing faith? In other words, the apostasy spoken of in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 was not 5 people denying Yahusha. It was the entire body of believers having backslidden into denial. Let me say that again. The apostasy that is spoken of, the Greek word is apostasia, which is in 2 Thessalonians 2, that the apostasy and denial of the basics of the messianic, historic, saving faith was in widespread denial because of pressure from family, pressure from persecution, killings, crucifixions, betrayals, brother betraying brother. Now you throw the whipped cream on top of that from the Nero persecution from 64 to 66, which was intense, and it was not limited to Judea or Jerusalem. It was throughout the Roman Empire. The Nero persecution was throughout the known Roman Empire. So by the time you get to the Parousia, which we say 70, but I'm going to make a case that it began 4 years earlier. But when the Parousia came, there was hardly anybody left to catch up. Now, the believing dead, oh, there were tons of those, right? That was former generations. So there were tons of believing dead from former generations. There were tons of those, unlimited supply, going all the way back to Adam, other than the martyrs who rose with Yahusha in Matthew 27. The martyrs rose with Yahusha. But other than that, they were in Sheol. So comes the resurrection. There was plenty. But notice, in terms of those who would be changed, okay? In terms of those who would be changed, not too many, because he says we will not be resurrected before the dead. So first are the dead in the true Amunah, once and for all times, delivered to the Israelite Kedoshim, Yehudah, the book of Jude. But then those who are alive and remain until the coming presence will go second, basically. But the term that he uses, remaining, you get my point? Not a lot will remain. There's just not a lot going to be left.
Well, the actual word for remain, it can also mean survive.
There you go.
So those that are alive and have survived. So not just when we read the scripture from its original language in the Greek, it means to leave around. In other words, whatever's lying around, basically. In other words, pick up. When you're picking up the mess, you look. Oh, there's a bit of rubbish there. So I'm not saying they were rubbish, but the point. The fact is that they that are alive and have survived that will be caught up to meet them or meet up with them to meet the master.
I like
so
that.
Surviving.
I like that interpretation. Those who survived, and the implication is clearly there are not many. So right. when Yahusha returns, and I believe if we're going to go by history, it was before the wrath. Okay, the wrath was for the unbelieving Jews, the synagogue of Satan. So we've got to expand our understanding of 70 AD. More than likely, this was in 66 AD. And as I said, I'll talk more about that another time. But again, remember the term Parousia does not mean a 24-hour day. Yahusha returned in the Parousia, meaning a point in time which was 24 hours. No, it is the king coming, presenting himself before his subjects, and then abiding for a prolonged period of time in the presence of his subjects. So let's do verse 16. I'm sorry. Before we get to 16, and also let me remind you with the mic you're using to you're going to get background noise, so it's important that background noise is limited. Okay, Sam, just that's a word for you, just because you got a surround mic. So it's not the breathing into the mic. Now it's the surround sound. Okay, so I want to follow up on what we just read about the dead will rise first. Okay, so those who are changed will not precede the dead who will arise first. Now we're in Revelation, chapter 20. Would you like to read that for us, please?
Verse 11?
Yeah, let's start in verse 11.
Okay, and I saw a great Keselavan and him that sat on it, from whose face the Olam and the Shamaim fled away, and there was found no place for them.
So okay, so this is the great white throne judgment. Now let's see when Revelation 20 was fulfilled. Was it fulfilled like Paul explained in First Thessalonian, or is it something yet future? Go ahead, 12.
And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Yahuwah, and the scrolls were opened, and another scroll was opened, which is the Sefer HaChaim, or the Book of Life, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the scrolls according to their mitzvot.
Continue.
And the sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Sheol delivered up the dead that were in them, and they were judged every man according to their own mitzvot.
Continue.
And the death and the Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death.
So I'd like for you to focus, if we can focus in on verse 13, that Sheol, which is the grave, okay, or in Greek, Hades, there's a point in time when Hades gives up the dead. And that's what we're reading about in First Thessalonians 4. So can you expand or expound on when this happened?
When it happened, good question. I mean, obviously, what we were taught in past times to where we are now, this whole situation is going to change the. You mean in biblical, like in the scriptural sense, or in?
No, I mean because we know that all the scriptures have been fulfilled.
Right, right.
So if all the scriptures have been fulfilled, including Revelation 20, 21, and 22, well, if we say all the scriptures were fulfilled by the first century, or in or by, so the question would be for the listener, when was this fulfilled?
Well, I mean, what I personally believe is that this was all fulfilled by AD 70,
Mhm.
and like as you said, it's a process. Obviously, what you brought out is regarding the resurrection of Matthew 27, um, and so forth. So there was one resurrection there. We can go on with other, but in saying that, what we have to look at is um, what is the actual purpose of this particular verse. The reality is talking about the fact that death itself, not just the souls that had died, but the literal death. This is dealing with death. This is dealing with the place that the dead went to um, when they did die. So
Right.
that was what, yeah.
And the underworld, Sheol or Hades in the Greek, gave up the dead. Well, we go back to First Thessalonians, and we see shall not be the living at the time of the parousia. The living shall not be resurrected before those who are in Hades, right? So those who are in Hades are resurrected at the parousia, correct? You there?
There is, well, there is that. That's like we know that 1,000 years is it's an undefined period of time, but it does say that the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were ended.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so
So
so they could
1,000 years are 40 years. They're
right.
the kilioi, or the period from 30 to 70, right? That's the so-called millennium. So Yahusha returns in 66 to 70 AD. The finality of the destruction was in 70. So when did Hades give up her dead? This has to be at the parousia after the 1,000 years. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
It has to be, because if we go back here, Here, the 1,000 years were completed. Here is the fire of 70 AD. The first resurrection can be either Yahusha in 30, or it could be Yahusha and those who rose in Matthew 27, the martyred saints with him. And then from 30 to 70, you have the transition period known as the Kilioi. And by the way, the early believers who believed in a 40-year transition period were known as Kilianists, or Kilianism, from the Greek word Kilioi, or Kilianism. So once that transition period is over, this is what we're reading about in 1 Thessalonians. First, the dead rise, then we who are alive and remain are changed. The point is, Paul was saying that both these events he expected to happen in the lifetime of the first century Thessalonians. Correct?
Yes, that's it. And that's right.
Yeah. So this right here, the grave, or Hades gave up the dead, is being spoken of right here. It's the same resurrection from Hades. It's the same event. It's right there. So go ahead, Berg. Do you have any hesitancy there, because you want to?
No, I'm just trying to mute the microphone because my grandson's crying in the background, and I don't want everyone thinking it's me.
If you have any alternate, because to me it's clear we're talking about after the Kilioi, after the 40 years, right?
Right.
And the first resurrection is Yahusha plus the first fruits that rose with him. Then comes the transition period. Then comes the emptying of Hades. Do you disagree with that, or you see it the same way?
I don't see. Well, I mean, I've got a slight difference of opinion on the Matthew 27, but that's for a topic for.
Well, that's what
time.
I said. First resurrection. Let's leave that out.
Yeah, but I do believe that the emptying of Sheol, death, everything that was basically everything that was fished up from Sheol, whether it be in the sea, whether it be in the mountains, whether it be in the ground. The fact is that death itself, in all forms, all shapes and forms, was taken up and completely destroyed in AD 70. What date? I'm not, like I said, we're not going to give specific dates. It's probably going to be on one of the annual feasts, which is what I see quite common through Josephus. I mean, I believe that they went into Jerusalem on Pesach, if I'm not wrong.
Okay, so you don't differ. You don't differ in that this is seen in 1 Thessalonians 4.
No, I don't at all.
The only question you may have, correct me here if I'm wrong, is who rose in Matthew 27?
Correct.
With Yahusha.
Correct.
Right, and that's why I wasn't addressing that.
Yeah, and that's fine. I understand what you're saying.
I'm trying to connect this to 1 Thessalonians 4.
Right.
But while we're at it, so what is your view on the ones who are the ones who rose with Yahusha at the exact time that he rose in 30 AD?
Well, if you read it, the scriptures say that they came out of their graves after the resurrection. It doesn't exactly say when after the resurrection, so that could be interpreted that way as well. Like, we came out of the graves after his resurrection. Was it 1 day, 2 days, 2 years, 3 years, whatever? Secondly, that's the only verse in the whole of the scriptures. There is no other second or third witness, like we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who have many witnesses in their gospels about the different, like, for example, the Olivet Discourse. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have their writings, and so does John in the book of Revelation, which is his account. So we need 2 or 3 witnesses. The second thing is that looking into the Greek, doesn't mean that the bodies were displaced. Were they thrown out of the graves at his resurrection? But then we read it says that happened after his resurrection. So again, that word "after," it's like saying, well, "Let's have dinner after."
Right. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'm not arguing with you because I want our listeners to hear a good discussion.
Yes.
But if we say after, could be 70 AD, could be, not necessarily at the same time Yahusha rose, then we are basically inserting a gap. We're basically we're leaving the context of 30 AD when Yahusha rose, and then many of the saints who slept appeared in the city, right? We're leaving the immediate context of 30 AD. We're inserting a gap. And I'm assuming you're willing to insert a 40-year gap so that this event in Matthew 27 actually could take place in 70 AD. And that's what our critics do. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, isn't that what futurism does? Okay, I'm going to put a gap in here. Then I'm going to put a gap in. Well, when is he coming? Well, after this. Okay. And then, well, wait a second. After that. Well, but wait a second. So it's just an opening, right, to insert gaps that are not there. So the point I'm not trying to make here is your view is valid. Whatever after is, you're not saying it was not when Yahusha rose. You're just saying the word after could mean a year after, could mean 2 years after.
And look, I mean,
That's valid.
Yeah, and we have to look at also the fact that the resurrection, when we're referring to the resurrection, which is the one that you're and I are, I believe we believe the same resurrection. There's not several. There is the one for all time. But we know that Yahusha was the first fruit of that resurrection. Correct. Now, interestingly enough, that if he's the first fruit, then there are fruits. So when they got resurrected, what I'm saying is I'm at a place right now where I'm not going to say for sure what I believe on that particular verse. I'm only going by what I've learned. But the reality is that, does the resurrection happen in the one day, or does it happen over a period of time? Because, like I said, did those people that rose afterwards, because if you read it, it says there was an earthquake and the temple veil was rent from top to bottom, and many of those saints that slept arose.
Right. I see your point. But it doesn't eliminate like you said, there's a single resurrection.
Right.
And whenever those Matthew 27 folks rose, whether it was the same time or a month later, whatever. The point is, that's not when Hades was empty, correct? Hades was emptied at the Parousia, which was some 40 years later, or perhaps 36 years later. Okay, that's the point. With what we're talking about here in Revelation, let me see if it's on the screen here. What we're talking about in Revelation, this is what 1 Thessalonians 4 is talking about, regardless of the saints that slept in Matthew 27. The grave, Hades, gave up the dead. So the point is, these, and let me get your understanding. These are individuals who are in Sheol. This is not going from Judaism on Monday, stay with me here, and then waking up on Tuesday and say, okay, resurrection has taken place. Now, you still have arthritis. You still have diabetes. You still have lockjaw syndrome. But a corporate body resurrection allegedly took place where Monday you were mortal, you wake up Tuesday, you're immortal. Monday you're corruptible. Tuesday you wake up, you're incorruptible. But there's no change. It's the same body. It's the same fingers. You're in the same house, as opposed to the individuals coming out of Sheol. That was my point in bringing us to this scripture. My point in bringing us to Revelation 20 was to see that each individual soul was called out of the grave at the parousia, the blessed return of Yahusha.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. And if you look at back at Revelation 20, if you can put it back up, if you see that firstly, it says that the sea and the dead that were in it, firstly death and Sheol were delivered up, and the dead that were in them. So the entity or the vehicle by which death, the old, where the spirits of the just and the unjust went to when they died physically, that was a situation all by itself. The rest of them were then judged after that was taken care of. They were judged, every man according to their mitzvah. We both agree that's the great white throne judgment. And then it says, and death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. So even death itself had a death. And whoever was not found written in the scroll of life or the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. So we see not two events, it's the same event.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that the entity was destroyed first, but Yahuwah gives every man an opportunity, I guess, to plead his case.
Right. Look, Sheol delivered up the dead to be judged.
Yes.
Daniel 12, 1 Thessalonians 4, etc., etc. The grave, Sheol, Hades, gave up the dead. And then there was no more need for Hades.
Right.
Because everyone, some to life, some to everlasting contempt and damnation. So
Correct.
once the parousia came, what we're trying to say, folks, if you're having a hard time following it, it's because you're either not listening or you've been taught wrong. What we're trying to say is that these verses that most of you all continue to push to the future, okay, even partial preterists who will accept everything fulfilled by 70 AD, except what? Revelation 20, except Revelation 21, and except Revelation 22. That is incorrect. What Sam and I are saying in one accord is that there was no more need for the grave because everyone was called out, some to everlasting life, whose names were written, some to everlasting death and contempt and condemnation. And because of that, whoever was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. And we don't want to get into what the lake of fire is. The point is, Sam and I are teaching you. We don't just believe. We're teaching you that all this happened. But 99% of you believe this is still future. And now we go back to 1 Thessalonians 4 and look at the wording here in verse 15. Sholiach Shaul expected for Yahusha to change his brethren that were in Thessalonica, those very few. We could even say 1,000. We could even say 800 because Yahuwah is very clear. By the time of the persecution, the general persecution from 30 to 66 AD, when the Jews were hunting, they were hunting believers to destroy them. Then came the whipped cream, an awful whipped cream, which was Nero. And from 64 to 66 AD, he hunted believers throughout the Roman Empire. And then, of course, many died naturally. And the ones who survived the first part of the tribulation escaped with their lives. They ran just like Yahusha told them to run. So the ones who ran and the ones who were left, as you said, like Sam pointed out before, those who survived, this literally could have been less than 1,000 people. Now, I'm not positing that in any way, shape, or form. It could have been 2,000. But you get my point? it wasn't what we think, that Yahushua is going to come and millions and billions of people are going to be changed. There was hardly anybody left with the true faith once for all times delivered to the saints. But even if there was 10 remaining, Yahushua returned for those 10. And certainly returned to lift individuals out of Sheol, Hades, right? But my point is, Sam, and I'm going to ask you this, what does this verse, which goes right along with 1 Thessalonians 4, what do you think this verse does to the corporate resurrection view versus the individual resurrection? What does this verse do to those 2 points of reference?
Well, it blows it out the water and makes it look wrong, doesn't it?
Explain.
Well, the reality is that we have nothing happens in singles. It all happens in one together. No, everything's together. Like Paul talks about the we part, we which are alive, those. He's always alluding to, those that rather than me or individual people, so to speak.
Okay, but so you accept the corporate body view that says that the resurrection that on Monday, when Yahushua returned, they went from Old Covenant Judaism into New Covenant belief, and there was no visible change, or are you saying the opposite?
Well, I believe that they were, when they were physically changed, they would change into their spiritual immortal bodies, meaning that they would not be there on earth. They would have.
In other words, they were changed, and then they were changed, and they were taken to an unseen realm.
Correct. They weren't exactly right. So they were changed. They weren't. When we say the difference between what you were saying before, I'm not saying you were saying it like that, but Monday we were there, and then we woke up on Tuesday. No, the reality is that on Monday we were there, and then on Monday we were gone. Like no one could see us. We were this body, this material thing that you can see. It's just cannot be seen with the human eye because
that's my point. My
correct.
point is,
yes.
But the corporate body, there's the individual body view, and then the corporate body view.
Right.
The corporate body view says that there was no visible, that when mortal became immortal, when corruption became incorrupt, they were left on earth in the seen realm. None of the 5 senses were affected. There was no real change. They just went from the old covenant and Jewish strangulation to the freedom of the new covenant. So it was covenantal. The resurrection was covenantal for the whole body of Messiah, as opposed to individuals together. Yes, together, but individuals coming out of the grave. So just to clarify your position, your position is that it was individuals who were resurrected into an unseen realm.
Correct. So there wasn't this, like I used to teach and believe, and I'm sure you did as well, that when the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, the rapture takes place, all the graves are going to shake and all the dirt's going to come out, the coffins are going to pop out. The people, this is what I used to say, the skeletons would come up on the side of the grave and all their skin would come back on and they would look like they did before they died, and then they'd be whizzed up in the air to ever be with the master. And I'm thinking, well, scripture tells us flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom.
Right.
Right. And this is the reality. You know, Paul talks about it, and remembering that the 1 Corinthians 15 is the same story, but to a different group of people. And the reality is that at a moment in the twinkling of an eye, we shall all be changed. So we're not going to have one person that, and look, the resurrection of that day was not about what we've been taught, that we're all taken out of our graves, and so on and so on. It is a spiritual, invisible, not from this dimension, not from this realm.
To a different
Correct.
unseen realm. We receive our new body, spiritual.
Correct.
Or taken to a spiritual realm in the heavens to be with
Correct.
Yahushua. So, but that's what I'm saying. The grave or Hades is no longer needed because at the return of Yahushua in the first century, Hades gave up. It's dead. And though they were changed, and then they were taken to the unseen realm, which means their old body that was in the grave, didn't fall to the earth, and they had to call the garbage department to collect the bones. In other words, the change took place when Messiah returned between 66 and 70 AD. He called them out of the grave, and they were changed, and then they entered the unseen realm. So there's no residue. You're not going to find the body because they were not changed in the atmosphere. They were changed and then taken to the unseen realm. Right?
Well, mortality, the scripture's clear. Mortality must put in immortality. Corruption must put on incorruption. How is that going to happen? No unclean thing can enter into his presence. So the reality is that when they were changed, everything, and I think it was Ed Stevens' article I read about the unseen rapture. The reality is that many of what we like, people say, oh, but there's no references of people, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's because they didn't have to be whizzed up through the air like you see in these ads and movies where you see them floating up through the air. It didn't work like that, brothers and sisters. Yahuwah is in a realm that we are not in yet. Yahuwah is in a realm that we cannot feel, we cannot see. Occasionally, he might allow us to have a glimpse. Occasionally, he might allow us to feel his presence. But it's just like Yahuwah's presence that we feel here is just like a tap on the shoulder. But the reality is, if look at Moses, for example, he couldn't even see Yahuwah without being completely melted in front of him. So, he had to change. And even when we die, physically, we go into the ground. That's it. We're not going to have to worry about being, our body's not going to be coming up out of the grave like we were taught. Once we die, immediately, not 2 seconds or 2 minutes, but immediately upon death, we are changed completely from our physical to our spiritual. Now, I'm not saying that our bodies aren't going to be in a coffin, etc., and everyone's going to grieve and all that. What I'm saying is that our spirit, our real person, inherits an incorruptible heavenly body that's waiting for us in heaven.
Right, but the point is that that at the resurrection, when Yahushua returned in the first century, that the saints and the unrighteous rose from Sheol. Let's look at it again. It says in Revelation 20, verse 14, 13 also, the sea gave up the dead that were in it. Death and Sheol delivered the dead that were in them. And then came the judgment, the white throne judgment, which was past, not future. So the point is this: the grave was emptied, and there was no more use for the grave. And the point is, this is the event that is being spoken of here. Okay, does that make sense? Yes, right? It does. This is the event that is spoken of here. The resurrected were coming out of Sheol, and they were not magically translated from the old covenant into the resurrection of the new covenant. That's by new birth, not resurrection. So we believe that each individual rose in a new spiritual body, to sum it up, correct? We believe that happened in the first century. So the verse 15 happened in their lifetime, in the lifetime of the Thessalonians. Okay, so let's read verse 16.
For the master himself shall descend from the Shamaim with a shout, with the voice of the chief heavenly Malak, and with his shofar, and the Tikar Gadolah of Yahuwah, and the dead in Mashiach shall rise first. After that, we who are living and remaining at his return will be seized together with them into the clouds to have a friendly encounter with the Master in the air, and so we will be always with the Master.
So verse 16 is some of the noise that Josephus in Jewish Wars, chapter 6, talks about. They heard chariots, they heard armies, they heard trumpets, they heard the shofar, they heard the voice of angels talking, and they heard the voice and the voices of those who had been in Hades saying, "Come, let us remove from hence," meaning let us get out of the earthly realm. We've been changed, and let us go into the unseen realm. So verse 16 is documented, this noise, this angelic noise over Jerusalem, starting in 66 and continuing, and I believe especially around Shavuot, Pentecost, was heard, and it was heard, and it was recorded. This is all resurrection music right here. I like to summarize it as resurrection music. The historians and the priests, they got spooked when they saw this. They let me change that. They saw nothing, but they heard everything. So when I say saw, I really mean heard. You follow what I'm saying?
They
didn't see anything. Yeah.
It's like John the Baptist when he was baptizing Yahusha. They heard the voice, but they never saw the dove or the Spirit descending, and they never saw anything. They just heard. So that's another example. They saw, I beg your pardon, they heard the voice saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased," but they did not see the Spirit descending like a dove. Only John saw that.
Correct. So again, he reiterates verse 15. First is the dead, then the living receive their heavenly bodies. Then here's the noise. And then amongst that first century noise above the temple, of course, in Jerusalem, first, the dead rise. So he's repeating what he summarized earlier in verse 15. Yes? So this is all documented. Zippotis, Josephus, and Josephus got his witness from the priests. In other words, brothers and sisters, history is on our side. We could look at 1 Thessalonians 4, and we could look at Revelation 20, verses 11 through 14. It's documented. We don't have to guess. The futurist has to try to figure out when Trump, when King Charles, when Hitler, World War I. No, wait a second. I'm sorry. I mean World War II. No, wait a second. When Underdog becomes one with Superman, and then they put on a Santa Claus costume, it's ridiculous. Yahuwah is very displeased. I'm going to speak for Yahuwah now, and y'all be quiet and listen. Yahuwah is very displeased with people that are making stuff up, because that's the truth about futurism. They're just making stuff up because they don't want to receive the fact that Revelation 20 is fulfilled in 1 Thessalonians, and Paul tells you that 1 Thessalonians will be fulfilled in his lifetime. Now, he didn't make it. He was beheaded during the Nero persecution. He almost made it. Paul was beheaded somewhere around 64. So he was called out of the grave. He was called out of Hades, right? But he almost made it, which is interesting. It's very interesting. And to the best of my studies, none of the 12 between death from 30 and then martyrdom, none of the 12 made it, so that their bodies were changed as opposed to having to come out of Hades. That's pretty sad to me. I mean, not sad, because in a year or two, they receive their glorified bodies anyway. But think about it. You're martyred in 64 or 65, and then the parousia starts to end the Nero persecution in 66, and then to begin the Roman Jewish War. There were two parts to the Great Tribulation, not two Great Tribulations, but two parts. And it's like, man, Paul almost made it, and Peter almost made it. So, friends, we appeal to history. This is not Roman history. This is not Pharisaic history. This is not any of that. This is history from all sides, from all persuasions. So let's get back to the text and be encouraged that Yahuwah is a promise keeper. So the dead will rise first. And by the way, before I forget, I want to say something because I know I'm going to forget. It's human nature. Do you remember, Sam, the scripture in Matthew 19 where Yahusha turns to the 12 shlichim and they said, what do we have? What do we have? We have left home, family, right? Land to follow you. So what do we have? What did Yahusha say? He said, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man returns, you will sit in his kingdom. You will sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now think about that. He didn't say you will sit on 12 thrones and run the sewer system in the kingdom. He didn't say you will sit on 12 thrones and you will operate the shoe shining division where everybody comes to get their shoe shine. What did he tell them? He said you will sit on 12 thrones doing what? Judging. So at the parousia, when these 12 came out of Hades, they took their throne and were the 12-member jury of the great white throne judgment. Did you ever hear of a 12-member jury? How many members are there in a jury?
12. 12. Exactly.
They were judging the Jews and the whore, Babylon. First Peter was in Babylon, Jerusalem, until he was martyred. And they were judging with Yahusha the onset of the new heavens and the earth. They were judging who would get into the new heavens and the new earth, and who would die in the old heaven and the old earth and not get into the new heaven. So it wasn't just Yahusha at the great white throne judgment. The 12 apostles were resurrected to be judges from 66 to 70 AD. I want you to think about that. It blows my mind. And when did he say what happened? In the what? In the regeneration. What does regeneration mean? In the next generation, after the old heaven and earth have passed away. In the regeneration, or the birth of the first generation, when the gates of the New Jerusalem were opened, they would be sitting not to run the water system, but to judge. Does that blow your mind? When I saw that, I just about fell off my rocker.
That's awesome. I hadn't seen the 12. I know that I've read that scripture and I've seen in Revelation it talks about it, but never quite seen it in that explanation. It's fantastic.
They were the jury because they were. They themselves were the victims of Jewish persecution.
Correct.
And they themselves were the victims of Roman persecution. And so they were part of the jury. That is the jury system. Yahushua is king, and these are his witnesses. And they were judging the regeneration of his kingdom.
That's awesome.
Man, Yahuwah's incredible. The way he does things decently and beautifully, historically in order. Yes. Okay, so the dead rise first, and then you want to read verse 17, please.
Sure. And after that, we who are living and remaining at his return will be seized together with them into the clouds to have a friendly encounter with the Master in the air, and so we will be always with the Master.
Go ahead.
So then come. Oh, sorry. Well, yeah. I mean, look, the scriptures say that he'll be coming in the clouds, and he came on the clouds, and we know that cloud comings is, part of how he used to come down. But in this situation, it says that they will be seized into the clouds. So in other words, as if you read in the time of Mount Sinai, Moses was taken up into the cloud to speak with Yahuwah. Well, it's the same scenario here. The difference is that this is not going to be something where these people would come back down again. These people went up with the Master, and it clearly states that they will always be there. They're not coming back in that sense.
That's right. That's right. And the word there, harpazo, is seized. So that's
Correct.
that word. Now, the word harpazo, the living, this is those who are living and remaining. And as I stated earlier, people think of the future rapture like a futurist, when Jesus is going to come back and millions of people are going to disappear, hundreds of millions are going to disappear. Dude, slow down. Just slow down. If you understand what Yahusha is saying, it's just the opposite. He's saying when he comes back, will he find anybody that still is faithful to the end? Because the very few who endure to the end will be saved, right? So what happens if there were 500,000 believers, born again believers in 30 AD? Then came the intense Jewish persecution. They were hunting believers. The believers had to meet behind closed doors. This is not just some persecution from the government. They were hunted. So you have that. Then you have Nero, who was determined. One of his goals in life was to wipe out the Christians, who he saw as a threat to his kingdom because they had another king, right? So by the time this takes place, where Yahusha comes and the living believers, those who remain, are harpazoed or seized to meet Yahusha in the clouds, I'm not exaggerating. It could literally be less than 1,000. It could be less than 2,000. But I'll guarantee you what, there are more people that live in your city than were changed when Yahushua returned, because there weren't many left. The word of Yahuwah is clear. And I think we have to get that picture and that understanding to really appreciate that Yahushua went out of his way just to change or to seize a couple of thousand people. It gives you a different perspective on things, doesn't it, Sam?
And that's the thing that people think, like you were saying before, about millions and millions of people being raptured and cars going off the motorway and planes, clothes and seats and all that rubbish, and that's a reality of it. I mean, the wording that Paul uses, we which are alive and remain, in other words, basically whatever's left. You know what I mean? Whatever's left, and
whatever survives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then the word harpazo does not mean caught up. See, now you'll notice in the rstne.com, we've changed this to caught up, and the reason is this: Sam and I were harpazoed into this work. So what Yahuwah did, he took my heart and he took Sam's heart and he knitted us, he seized us together so we can team up to do this podcast. So we were harpazoed sideways, right? We were harpazoed horizontally, right?
Well, maybe that's why. Remember a few episodes back when somehow I went to the side?
Yeah.
So that's the...
Exactly. So harpazoed, or in Philip, for instance, in Acts chapter 8.
Right.
Philip was caught from point A to point B. Yes? On earth. There was no going up to heaven. So that was seized. When we're born again in John chapter 3:16, we must be born again and believe in the Son. We are seized for him. Our hearts were seized. Does that mean our hearts went up? No. It means It was literally captured, right? Captured and seized. So that's why I correctly changed caught up to seized. So the dead will rise first, Revelation 20. Hell will, the grave, Hades will give up the dead. Then we who are alive and remain will be seized together with those coming out of Hades. No more need for Hades. And together, not separately, because Hebrews 11 says that they were waiting for us, that he had the gates of the New Jerusalem closed because he did not allow, or he did not want the first covenant saints to get into the New Jerusalem before us. John chapter 3, no man has gone into heaven except the Son of Man who came down from heaven. They were waiting for us. They were waiting for this event, the Parousia, from 66 to 70 AD. It ended in 70. It didn't start in 70. And then we will meet him in the clouds. And like you said, the clouds is his presence, his abiding presence. So we remained in his presence during the Roman Jewish war. See, we remained in his presence during the tribulation. You see, so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We think of, oh, the believers were hiding during the Great Tribulation. Well, if they were caught up in 66 and the Roman Jewish war started in 66, then guess what, brothers and sisters? We were already in the clouds. Okay? Did some run away before that? That's possible. I don't know. I wasn't there. But this is the context of what is being spoken. And the reason I put to have a friendly encounter. Now, the Greek, if you look at the Greek, it merely says in the English to meet the master in the air. But if you look at that word meet, it's actually to dine, to have a friendly meal or a friendly reconnection, right? Because we're his friends. Yahushua said in John, I call you my friends, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. Therefore, I call you friends. So it's the seizing of the righteous to his bosom in the clouds, in the glory. And we have a friendly, we're no longer enemies. See, the meaning there is we were enemies, but now we've been reconciled through Messiah's blood and through his water, right? So we have a friendly get together in the air. So that's where we get that language from in the rstne.com. And so we will always be with the master. So all that means, what that means is we are going to be permanently surrounded by his presence, surrounded by his personage, surrounded by his love and his embrace. In other words, we're never going to feel separated. We're never going to feel apart. We're never going to have, like now, we have good days, bad days. Like Monday, we feel close to the master. Tuesday, we feel distant. Wednesday, we're tired. Thursday, we're disappointed. No, all those peaks and valleys are going to come to an end. We're going to be continually with the master. What that means is the stability of eternal bliss sets in. That's the ultimate goal of the new covenant, is the permanence of eternal bliss. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's right. And the fact that the new covenant is everlasting, it has no end. At the moment, we are, in the new covenant by being born again, but we haven't had our change yet spiritually into our spiritual body, and that time is coming when we will have our new heavenly body at death, physical death. And as you say, we won't have to worry about waking up with a sore hip, waking up with a sore head, needing to have a coffee. I mean, I'm hoping that there's going to be coffee out there.
I hope so. But this is talking about that generation. In other words,
yes,
what we're reading about happened historically. It's not just, as you said, correct. It's not just about us. If this had not taken place when Yahuwah said it took place in the first century, then everything you just said would escape us. The reason we know that we are going to have eternal bodies and be with Yahushua upon our death is because all this was fulfilled. If all this is yet futuristic, that we die and we do not have any guarantee, because the gates of the New Jerusalem are closed. In other words, they slept in Hades until Messiah came and he rose and he returned. So it was his return that opened up the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem was closed until he was married. He consummated the marriage between 66 and 70, not in 30. That's when he was betrothed, right? So this happened so that what you just described, which is to be absent from the body and confident that we're going to be in the New Jerusalem, is a result of 1 Thessalonians 4, Revelation 20, Daniel 12, all being historically valid events. Right? They've been verified by history. Certainly not by believers. Josephus was not a believer. Cephanus was not a believer. Tacitus was not a believer. Cassius Dio was not a believer. This is all documented history. And it's a shame, in my view, that full preterists don't take advantage of this history. All we do is talking about 70 AD. That's all we do is talk about 70. Well, why don't we use history, which is on our side? Any thoughts?
Yes, and like, when you see Paul talking here, he says he's talking in a futuristic sense at that time. At that time. So like you keep hearing me, all of you keep hearing me saying about audience relevance, who, what, where, when, how, etc., etc. The reality is that most of the futurists, and I used to do that too, we used to put ourselves into that scripture, into that verse. Like, in other words, Paul was standing right in the room with us, right at that very moment, saying, "You which are alive," and we, meaning me, Paul, that was here 2,000 years ago, and you in 2025 will remain until the coming of the Master. But the reality is that he's not talking to us. He's talking to the believers in Thessalonica. He's speaking to the believers in Rome, wherever he was writing to. So what we do have, and I'm sure that all the futurists would agree that, having the scriptures, for example, gives us what happened and what was said, and that's no doubt about it. But we also need to go and look at the history books as well. Josephus, Tacitus, all of those writings, though there's some stuff in there that doesn't quite sit right with our train of thought, like some of the wording that's used, some of the terminology, but you have to understand they are not people like us who have accepted Messiah, that have corrected our doctrines and are still correcting our doctrine, etc. They are men that are completely ignorant in that sense to what we know and what the apostles knew. So they were writing it from their perspective, and they used terminology that they were accustomed to. Just like if you were to come to Australia or New Zealand and meet with the Indigenous people, they would refer to Yahuwah as something that you would think, oh, that's weird, that's crazy. But you got to understand that's how they're describing Yahuwah. But the way they see Yahuwah is not how we see him. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So the today Hades is no longer necessary, right? Sheol, because the righteous have gone on to be with Yahusha. The unrighteous have experienced separation from Yahuwah. So when people die, there's a grave, but their fate is already sealed. So let's close with the last verse here because we're almost out of time. It went pretty quick as usual. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah, praise Yahuwah. So, you want to read verse 18, Brother Sam?
So then comfort one another with these words.
And boy, do they bring comfort.
Exactly. I mean, you can't get any clearer than that. I mean, they were in the thick of it. They were experiencing it. They were going to experience it. So comforting each other was so vital, probably more needed then than what we do now, because in reality, we hear that that saying it's not handed to you on a silver platter. Well, technically it is, because all we have to do is to follow what Yahusha said to do by being born again of the water and the Spirit, living a set apart life to the best that we can, remembering that our righteousness is but filthy rags. It's only His righteousness that we have anything hope of anything.
Absolutely. So we can be confident that all this took place in the first century and that they experienced these things, and we can rejoice that there's no contradiction between scripture and history. In other words, history is on our side. Anyway, Sam, we are running out of time.
Yes, I see.
And we are out of time, and it's been a wonderful time in the Word, a wonderful time of refocusing our eyes on the reality of His parousia, and not having to be ashamed that we are covenant eschatologists, but to thank Father for the comfort that we comfort one another, having this understanding together. Amen?
Amen.
Amen, brother. Shalom, shalom, family. Thanks for joining
Yes.
us. See you next week.
Bless you all.
Shalom, shalom.